Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Half-Life podcast. Wow, I haven't done one of these in a while. I think it's been a couple of months since last time. I've been so busy working on a lot of the other videos, the cryptids and monsters, the urban legends, the ghosts and spirits, and then, of course, some of the Godzilla videos that I haven't really got around to this. But I thought I would get back to it and start focusing again on some of the creatures found within just the first Half-Life game. Very key, just the first Half-Life game. And this one is a very memorable creature. So simple, yet so effective. It was so perfect its first go-around that it has remained virtually unchanged since the very first game. It's been featured in most, if not all, of the other Half-Life games thereafter. And there was even going to be one separate, I guess, version of it later on, but that was canceled, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm referring to the creature, the very memorable one known as the Barnacle, which you'll see a picture of here. Anyone who has played Half-Life knows how fascinating this creature is. Everyone remembers the very first encounter with this creature because of the way that the scenes played out whenever you first literally ran into these creatures. That moment whenever you're running into a room and then all of a sudden something, for whatever reason, has latched onto you. You have no control. Suddenly you're being pulled up, and then as you instinctively move your camera view upwards, you'll see a mouth gaping right towards you, and then that's it. Unless you can react quickly, then that's pretty much it for your character. So let's talk about the Barnacle and how it came to be. For starters, the Barnacle is essentially one of those alien creatures that came onto Earth whenever the first Half-Life incidents occurred there at Black Mesa. And what's fascinating about this creature is that it makes so much sense. It's one of those perfect creatures that the Half-Life developers made, where it mimics a lot of the creatures here on Earth, and yet it makes it into an alien. But at the same time, it seems like it makes so much sense. And what I mean is this: it's a creature that all it does is it latches on to anything that comes within its territory. What's fascinating about the creature is that it never moves, or it's never seen moving. To this day, within all the games, there has never been one instance showcasing how the barnacles exactly get to the place that they dwell or hang on from. Yet it's presumed that it was able to do so at one point. It wasn't just necessarily, let's say, created right then and there, although there's some debate as to that too. And then once it's latched on to its spot, it stays there, according to the dialogue within the scientists in the game, for pretty much for the rest of its life. And then all it is it has one giant appendage, its tongue, which hangs down from the ceiling or from its area that it's perching, and then that's it. It just waits for the prey to come along. Obviously, there are various animals here in real life in this earth that work the same way. For example, from those snapping spiders, the ones that wait in terms of a hole and then wait for some prey to come along. And there's also various fish out there that just hover near an area waiting for other fish to come out. Whenever that happens, they both snap forward, grab the prey, and then go back. Then that's it. It's history. There's even a real life worm of some sort that has a feature of sorts where it creates, let's say, a line filled with some kind of mucus or some kind of sticky substance. And when it does it, I believe it's called the glowworm. When it does that, then whatever catches on to that line, this glowworm then comes down and grabs it and then eats it. So very beautiful work with regards to the developers from Half-Life of incorporating so many real-life animal traits into this creature. And then that's the thing, as I was mentioning earlier, very first encounter within the game with this creature. Once it's there and it has its tongue down and it's waiting for its first prey, then you run into it, or in some cases, and almost comically, you see others run into it. It'll latch on to that person or yourself. It'll pull you up, and then you have a couple of seconds to take care of things. You could either use your crowbar to strike at it several times, or more conveniently, you could use your gun to do so. But even then, that's even a risk, because if the precarious situation is, let's say you're being pulled up more than 50 feet into the air, you could swing all you want or shoot all you want, but then when that thing lets you go and you fall all the way down, it can create some major damage. So much to the point that if your health is low enough, you could actually die right there. What's fascinating to note is that this creature, this barnacle, was made by the developers as a way to stop some of the early players, some of the early test players within the game from just going into any room, rushing in as is. It seemed like they noticed that too many of these test players weren't having, let's say, too many problems just rushing into rooms, and so this was created as a way to stop that. And it makes sense because once you have your first encounter with a barnacle and you know what to look for thereafter, you will never run into any room unwarranted. You're always going to be looking with your flashlight. You're always going to be looking with even some cases infrared to try to see where those long tongues are located, and then once you do, then you'll take care of them there. That's the other thing about these barnacles. They are only, or they tend to be located only in dark atmospheres, which makes sense again from an animal perspective. They're not going to be out in the wide open. Instead, they tend to be found around corners within the game. They tend to be found in dark, shadowy areas. I remember there's one key point within the first Half-Life game where you're in some air vents of some sort, and it's really tight, cramped space. There's a lot of air vents around. You have to jumble and go up and jump over and then duck under other air vents, and you have to climb some ladders, and then lo and behold, in a lot of those dark spots there's a barnacle waiting for you. And then on top of that, these places have low, let's say, ceilings, so it's not like the other places where you're given a couple of seconds to react. No, once this barnacle has you, then it'll pull you up, and then within like 1 or 2 seconds, that's it. It'll start eating you and consuming a lot of your health. That's the interesting thing too about the barnacles. If you happen to be in a situation where you see others get caught within the barnacle's long tongue, then you can see pretty much from your own eyes what happens to it. It's one of those grotesque things where you can't help but watch, and whenever you see it, and in some cases you can purposely make it done by, let's say, hitting a scientist and forcing him to run into the barnacle. We've all done it. I'm sure you've done it. I've done it. Or in some cases also the soldiers who come within the game, the black ops that you're trying to kill, they get caught up in the barnacle's tongue. And the way it works is once they get caught up, apparently the AI within the first game, they cannot fight back, not unlike yourself where you can shoot or use your melee weapons. No, in this case, the barnacle, once it has them in its possession, then that's it. They struggle a little bit, but they cannot fight back, and then you see the creature kind of swallow the top half of their body, and then you hear some strange gurgling sounds. By the way, it's a great touch from the developers when it comes to the sound effects of the barnacle. Whenever it grabs something, it has like this eager, I guess, sound that it makes, like it's huffing or puffing of some sort, like it's so happy to have something in its possession. And then once it's grabbing onto something, you hear like this chomping sound, very realistic. And then finally, once it gestates, like it actually eats the whatever thing it has, whether it's a human or in some cases some of the animals from Zen. Once that happens, then you hear like this eerie, creepy sound, like it's, let's say, it's a gestation of various body parts in a pot of some sort, and then it actually regurgitates the entire meal, but the bones, and then that's it. So it's a weird cycle. It's one of those things again that I mentioned earlier. You can't help but look whenever this is happening, and you see either the scientist or the soldier get pulled up, they get half eaten, and then finally they get full eaten, and then you see the bones spew back down, and then you'll see the tongue come down as well. Great work by the developers, and again, so fascinating to think that it was probably at some point late in the game that this creature was developed as a way to stop test players from running so quickly into rooms unabated. Also, with regards to the barnacle, it has, as I mentioned earlier, no changes within the rest of the series, within the rest of the franchise, so perfect that it was. There was one brief point, apparently in Half-Life 2, and you'll see a picture of it here, that there was going to be something called the Sand Barnacle. Unfortunately, it was never finished. There was no AI done to this. The only thing that was created was pretty much the skin texture that you're looking at, and then that's it. So no scripting, no AI, so there's no function that, let's say, a hacker can use to create a scene according to what Half-Life 2 would have had it done, and there's no detail from any of the scripting or the text that showcases what the Sand Barnacle was going to do. But presumably it was going to be something stuck instead of on top, let's say, or hanging from a ceiling or hanging from some rafters or wherever. Instead, it was going to be stuck on the ground. So how this thing was going to work, who knows, but it was going to be absolutely a different variation from the Barnacle that you and I know of. It's too bad that it never got fully developed. It would have been interesting to see how it acted. My guess is that, considering that it's stuck on the ground, that it probably would have had its tongue, but it probably would have been its tongue, let's say, hidden on the ground. Like, let's say, just like your average noose, the ones that people hang within the bottom of the ground to capture an animal. And then once the animal's leg goes through that noose, then it triggers a trap, and then the spring pulls and the animal is pulled up. And I think that's what they would have gone eventually with this game, where the barnacle's tongue would have been hidden somewhere in the ground as its form of, let's say, camouflage, and then all it took is for yourself as a player to come across it, accidentally trigger the tongue, and then it would have captured you and pulled you in. I'm guessing that that's probably would have been the most key thing that this thing would have gone. Now let's look at some early concept art for the Barnacle itself, and you'll notice that again there's a very little change. It was such a perfect design that very little of it, if anything, was changed from the very beginning up until the game itself. You'll see the standard texture of the barnacle, the brownish hue related to its skin. You'll see those talons that it uses to grip onto whatever, let's say, format it's on. And then, of course, you'll see the fangs that it has, which it uses to grasp onto and eventually eat within the prey that it has. I'm trying to remember if I recall seeing it grasping any of the like Zen creatures. I don't recall so, but I'm sure someone can mention if they have. I'm sure there are videos out there on YouTube where people spawn purposely, like let's say hound eyes, or they spawn some of the other creatures like bull squids right in front of the barnacle, and then it's able to eat them right then and there. But it definitely has the ability to do so. And then here's this other concept art which showcases an interesting thing. Apparently there was going to be barnacles within Zen. We didn't see any actually within the Zen game later on, because it seems like that this particular creature, for whatever reason, it's definitely here on Earth, but not anywhere else. Although there is this picture, I'm trying to remember where it was, and I believe this was in the Half-Life, the Blue Shift game, but within the first game that I'm talking about here for this video, it was not encountered within Zen at all. So rather fascinating to note there. But there you go, the Barnacle, a very interesting, very memorable creature within the Half-Life game. If anyone has any more information that they would like to say, at least again just talking about the first game that I didn't cover here, it would be great to hear. But again, very memorable. The sound effects for the game, the action, the little scripting whenever it caught onto something and pulled it up, it was so wonderful, so memorable to see this thing in action. So alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care, bye.